Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Friend Show. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, and today I'm joined by Marius Roodt. Marius, how are you, sir?
How's it, Nick? I think we just need to let our listeners know we're starting early because I'm due for load shedding at 2 and I also had water all day, so I haven't bathed today either. So all the joys of living in a slowly failing state.
Isn't it
Oh, thank
wonderful?
God this
Isn't it
is
wonderful?
virtual.
Yeah, no, it's one of the great benefits. I must say that most challenging part of podcasting from home for me is that I have to resist the urge to wear my dressing gown when it's a little bit cold, because that's probably not becoming of a good podcast. Anyway, we are also, of course, joined by Ms. Sara. Sara, how are you?
All the better for having seen a little bit of blue sky, but it doesn't look like it's going to hold.
Indeed, it does not, and I suspect the cold bits of autumn are not far behind. Anyway, let us dive into the news of today. Not a terribly busy day, at least as far as South Africa is concerned, but there are a couple of interesting things going on. First, we are continuing to see the growing influence of the Patriotic Alliance, the party founded by former bank robber Gayton McKenzie, which has taken a very sort of explicitly colored nationalist line, I think, in a lot of its messaging, and has made sort of small but significant breakthroughs all over the country to establish itself in a lot of municipalities as a kingmaker. They are quite interesting. We've talked a little bit about this on the show before, for how they're kind of pretty much willing to go into coalition with whoever will give them the best deal. They don't seem to have much in terms of ideological preferences. So in Gauteng, in Johannesburg, the PA is part of the governing coalition along with the DA, Action SA, ACDP, and some of the other parties. But in some municipalities in the Western Cape, and I think the Northern Cape as well, the Patriotic Alliance has actually managed to win the mayorships. Now, just a reminder, in our local municipalities out in the countryside, so outside of the big cities, the metros, there are two layers of municipality. You've got your local municipality, which is the one you interact most with, and then a bunch of those form together to create a district municipality. So that's like the next layer up. And Gayton McKenzie, after being sworn as a PA councillor very recently, has been elected as the mayor of the Central Karoo District Municipality. So that's a municipality that includes the smaller municipalities of Laingsburg, Prince Albert, and Beaufort West. So in the Western Cape, that sort of northern bit on the border with the Northern Cape. And he's made quite a big splash on Twitter by when he was appointed. He said on Twitter, in his main speech, and it was relayed on Twitter, "I came here to come and give. That's why I will donate 100% of my salary. While the enemy is busy checking which land they can build, I'm going to give 100% to start fixing the pools for our children. I will not have a mayoral vehicle," he also said. He said that the mayoral vehicle will be sold and an ambulance must be bought with the funds. "I will not claim for any petrol expenses. I want to cost this municipality nothing." He also said that he did not want bodyguards. His deputy, who is Kenny Kunene, who also has I think is a former convict, also congratulated him on Twitter, saying, this is where the PA plays to win. He also McKenzie, in response to being called to people bringing up his criminal past, said, "They can call us criminals. Yes, we did commit these crimes 3 decades ago. We went to jail. We paid for our crimes. We share our riches because we know what it is not to have." Okay, so interesting stuff. He also said that when he was boasting about the takeovers, that "I do not play with power," saying that he plays to win. So I think Gayton McKenzie and to a lesser extent Kenny Kunene have demonstrated that they are quite savvy political operators. The PA is not a very big party. They did not get a lot of votes, even in the municipalities which they control. It's in coalition with the ANC. But it seems like they're very good at getting the spotlight and using negotiating and leverage to get themselves into power. Sara, what do you make of this?
Well, I have to give Gayton McKenzie credit. I think he's probably the best qualified person to start a political party in South Africa. I also wondered about whether he said they paid their dues, so to speak, by going to jail for 30 years ago. But he wasn't entirely clear on where this money was coming from that he was going to give. I mean, other than his salary, it suggests that maybe they hid their loot under a tree and retrieved it on release from the penal system. I think what I mean, obviously, ostensibly, guys like him should not be anywhere near a political party. But I think what they do offer is they're robust. They're frank. He's a big guy, and I think also trading very much on the coloured vote is at least a certain winner within a constituency, and I think that's probably key to his success. To some extent, I think it's the sort of appeal of the strong man. After all the faffing and fuffing we've had with the ANC over the years and the theft, people are prepared to take the chance of somebody who calls a spade a truck full of shovels or whatever, and maybe does have that stash under the tree. I don't think principles largely come into it, and I'm not sure that his record is that great. I think very often he certainly the Patriotic Alliance made a real pain of itself in the negotiations to form a coalition in Joburg. So I think they're very canny operators, cannier for themselves than they perhaps are for their constituencies. But it's an appeal. It does have an appeal. It's straight up and down.
Marius, I think many South Africans will be very happy to hear that Mayor McKenzie doesn't want to have the municipality spend any money on him. But, he's always had a lot of people sort of accusing him of corruption and double dealing and stuff. How seriously do you think we should take his claims that he's really not going to cost the municipality anything?
Look, I mean, it's probably possible he's not going to cost the municipality anything direct costs. Maybe, as he says, he won't charge him, he won't municipality pay for his petrol, and he'll sell the official vehicle. But who knows what's going to be going on behind the scenes and making sure that him and his associates get the tenders and all that kind of thing. But I think the PA is quite an interesting organization. We've seen these kind of coloured identity parties emerge in South Africa from time to time, but they've generally been restricted to one area. I mean, we had ICOSA down in the Independent Civic Organisation of South Africa down in the Karoo. They did pretty well for a while, but they seem to have fallen away. And we've seen now in Cape Town, there's the Cape Coloured Congress has emerged, but they seem to be, pretty much just in Cape Town. But the Patriotic Alliance, it seems to be doing well amongst coloured people in the Karoo. It's doing pretty well in Gauteng and won 2 wards in Ekurhuleni in last year's election. So it's got definitely more appeal than just in the Cape. And there was also a by-election recently in Northwest. I can't remember which municipality now, unfortunately. But the Patriotic Alliance got around about 30% of the votes in the by-election. And as you know, I mean, there aren't that many coloured people that live in the Northwest. So I'd have to have a look at the data, but I would imagine there's probably a municipality where there's more Black South Africans living there. So it seems like the PA could be a kind of a crossover party, and it's definitely something to watch. But also, I mean, politics among coloured South Africans is some of the most interesting. They're the real swing voters in South Africa. I mean, as you know, white South Africans generally vote for the DA, now maybe the Freedom Front Plus, and I actually say Black South Africans in general, outside of KwaZulu-Natal, generally vote for the ANC or the FF. But coloured people, the most voting patterns are very fluid in the Western Cape. Maybe not as much as it was in the past with the emergence of the DA and so on. But we've seen also, I mean, all these strange small parties emerge in the Karoo, like Karoo Gemeenskappartij, Karoo Democratic Force, and all this kind of stuff. So it's all pretty interesting to watch. But yeah, I mean, I think we're going to have to watch what Gayton McKenzie gets up to now. And if he keeps his promises, I think it'll be good. He'll set an example for other politicians, which I think is actually amazing to say. I mean, convicted bank robber might be setting an example for other politicians, but I think it's something to watch. I'm not too sure if he will stick to these promises. And we know the PA seems to be pretty I'm not sure how principled they are, and they pretty much, they'll go into alliance with whoever's going to make sure that they get the most goodies and so on. So it's definitely something. Yeah, I think what happens in that district municipality is definitely going to be something to keep an eye on in the future.
Definitely. I must say that I do worry a little bit that the PA kind of represents a sort of nihilistic turn in our politics, a sort of turn towards, it's not really about changing the rules or anything. It's just about our team getting whatever we can from the system, which obviously, the ANC certainly has that element, and so does the EFF. In fact, a lot of the parties have at least that element within them, but a lot of them still do at least have an ideological core. There's a belief in how they want to see the country. I'm not sure what the PA wants to see from the country other than them and their supporters in particular getting enriched. Anyway, sorry, final thought.
I was going to say, and there is definitely, I think, an element of, in some of this kind of coloured identity politics, a resentment element. You've seen like these slogans: "We weren't white enough under apartheid, we're not black enough now." And I know we've, I think it was called Gatvol Capetonian down in the Cape. They were saying that these people who are from the Eastern Cape need to go back from the Eastern Cape, and only if you were born in Cape Town, or if your family came here, at least if your family's been there at least for 40 or 50 years, can you stay there? So there's quite a nasty identity politics element that's emerging that I think is something to watch out for. But I mean, as the economic pie shrinks, that's the kind of thing that's going to happen. There's going to be less for, people are going to fight over resources and so on.
Sara, final thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right, and I think the PA will exploit that, and the good sounding things of selling the mayoral car, etc., will play well initially. The question is whether they actually have the whatever it takes to make a municipality work, and particularly a district municipality, because those places are far apart, they're isolated, and they're poor. And I am concerned that we look at it 4 years, 3 years down the line, and nothing much will have in fact happened. Maybe they can prove us wrong.
Yeah, I saw. I went through Beaufort West on the at the beginning of the year. In fact, all these areas that are part of the Central Karoo District Municipality, and those are some depressed-looking towns. So, yeah, we'll see what happens there. Anyway, let us move on to our next topic for today, and this is the first round of the French presidential election. So, we have, in a lot of ways, a repeat, it seems, of the last election. The center candidate, the sort of centrist, center-left candidate, Emmanuel Macron, managed to win, in fact, doing better than his performance in the first round of the French presidential election. So the French have 2 rounds when they vote for their president. Everyone gets to run the first one, and then the top 2 go through to the next round, and then whoever wins that one becomes president. He's followed fairly closely by Marine Le Pen, who also ran against Macron last time. And third place, with about 21.9% of the vote, was Jean-Luc Mélenchon, I think that's how you said it. Anyway, who did well in some of the parts of Paris, and got a pretty hefty chunk of the vote, but he doesn't look like he's going to make it through to the second round. There was another right-wing candidate, sort of on a similar platform to Le Pen, called Zemmour, who got about 7% of the vote. The center-right, sort of old-fashioned conservative candidate did very badly. She got 4.7% of the vote. And then the Green candidate also did extremely badly, getting around 4.5% of the vote. So it looks like sort of all the old parties in France have kind of fallen away, at least on the presidential level. And we're now seeing the sort of Front National, Marine Le Pen, and Emmanuel Macron, who also, I think, created his own new party and sort of surged to national prominence, going through to the second round. But what's different from last time is that last time Macron beat Le Pen by like 15 points or something like that, a lot of percentage points.
More than that, I think it was 66 to 34.
Right, so it was a big victory. But it looks like, according to polling, this is going to be much, much closer. some of the polls I think are now suggesting that Macron is around on 52% of the vote, with Le Pen looking to get something like 48. So that's exactly the kind of thing that's basically pretty close to a margin of error for a lot of polls. And I think it's anyone's game at this point. Marius, let me start with you. What do you make of this? What are some of the interesting things you saw from this French election? What are the takeaways?
Yeah, well, I think the main thing is, as you say, the second round is going to be much closer than in the past, 52 to 48 instead of, I mean, that's the polling at the moment, and instead of 66 to 34, which was the result in the second round, also between Le Pen and Macron in 2017. So it's definitely something to watch. If Le Pen does win, I think that's going to shake up things in Europe. It could spell some trouble for the EU, I think. And Marine Le Pen, although she softened her stance on things like immigration and Muslims in France and so on, she's also said she'll make it illegal to wear the veil in public. And whatever you might think about, people wearing the veil, you should be allowed to, in a free society, wear an Islamic veil if you want to. There shouldn't be a law stopping you from doing it. So I think that's definitely something to watch, and it's something that's a bit worrying. I think that what's also quite interesting, though, in this election, Emmanuel Macron and Marine Le Pen both did better in the first round than they did in the first round in 2017. Macron got nearly 28% of the vote. He got 24% in the previous election in the first round. Marine Le Pen got 23% compared to 21% in the first round in the last election. But I think what's also happened with Marine Le Pen, as you mentioned, that Eric Zemmour guy, he's pretty much a far-right figure. He's part of this. He talks about this great replacement theory that Muslims are going to come flooding into France and get rid of all people of French origin. So I think for a lot of people, that's actually softened what people think about Marine Le Pen. They compare her to Zemmour.
Right.
She's much more reasonable, or seems much more reasonable.
On that point, a lot of what I've read about this election suggests that while the outside world is focused on Marine Le Pen's views on sort of stuff like immigration and Islam and stuff like that, a lot of French voters seem to be talking far more about the fact that she has been very focused in her internal campaigning on economic issues. And a lot of French people seem to be quite dissatisfied with Macron's economic performance over the last couple of years.
I think he did pretty well. France recovered fairly well after the various coronavirus lockdowns. And I think that's why Macron's not doing too badly in these polls and so on. But also on the issue of Muslims in France and so on, Emmanuel Macron's also been cracking down on extremists in France. He's spoken about the emergence of a parallel state in France. I'm not sure if it's happened, but there were talks about shutting down private Islamic schools in France. This was happening under Macron, because they're apparently radicalizing people and so on. So I think, Emmanuel Macron on certain issues has also been pushed to the right by people like Marine Le Pen and Eric Zemmour and so on. And just on the final point, the Socialist Party, which used to govern France, François Mitterrand, who was president for a long time in the late 20th century, he was from the Socialist Party. In this election, they didn't even get 2% of the vote. So I think also a big thing to look at is the realignment in French politics, and the two parties that used to dominate French politics, the Socialist Party, now they're called the Republicans, but they came from the old Gaullist movement and Jacques Chirac's party, that became part of the Republicans. I mean, between the two of them, the Socialists and the centre-right, they barely got 7% of the vote. So I think there's been a realignment in French politics, and I think we'll probably start seeing that around the world, especially in the West, with issues such as migration. Also, other things will probably climate change and all that kind of thing will also emerge. And I think the kind of old dichotomies between the left and the right are going to start to fade. And by the middle of the century, I think politics, especially in the West, is going to look a lot different from how we've been used to it in the last 30 or 40 years.
Yeah, it's quite interesting to me. I saw an analysis which suggested that since the last time that Le Pen ran, she actually has moved more to the left on a lot of economic issues. And she sort of is now kind of she's in a sort of quite protectionist area. She believes in sort of, slowing down free trade and stuff like that, which is one of the reasons why she's not super keen on the EU. I doubt France will leave the EU anytime soon, but electing Le Pen would certainly be a move towards that. Sara, what do you make of all this?
I'm not surprised, that someone sort of far right moves to the left on economic issues, because it makes a lot of sense that the people that would support that would be working class, blue collar workers. They are being
right.
hit by.
Sorry to interrupt interrupt, but just on that point, if you look at where Le Pen's support comes from, it comes from the old sort of Rust Belt, so to speak, of France on the borders with the sort of Belgium and stuff like that.
And it's almost like, I suppose the neatest comparison would be the Brexit vote, the Remainers being the sort of tertiary educated elite on the one hand, and the range of ordinary people on the other. And I think she would reflect that. I mean, if she won the election, whether or not there was any attempted moves out of the EU, that would be extraordinary, because France has, or certainly Macron sees France as the sort of hoping to be the governing power of the EU on the one hand, but on the other hand, you have Viktor Orban coming in again as the president, prime minister of Hungary, with an increased margin, and that's distinctly right. Some say far right, and that sense of movement with Hungary, Poland. If France were to go that way, the EU, I think, would be in real crisis, because that very vote, where by its nature is pretty much an anti-EU vote, and I think the people who would vote for the right, by and large, feel that would feel that they don't want to be governed by an unelected European elite. Whether Marine Le Pen will make it this time, I don't know. I suspect, like often happens in elections, that the incumbent is likely to get through. But then again, Macron was a new force, 2 or 3 elections ago. So there are no guarantees, particularly in a world that is becoming, reverting back to a less globalist view and a much more nationalist view of things, and the people and the people are supporting, or pulling in for that.
Well, what's quite interesting actually is you talked a little bit about Hungary sort of going right as well. And Poland, of course, has been ruled for a long time by the Law and Justice Party, I think they're called, who are pretty right, especially on social issues. But what's interesting is that they've actually fallen out over Ukraine. The Czech Republic, Slovakia, Poland, Hungary, they were calling themselves, I think, the Visegrad Group. And they were like a pressure group within the EU that was, against taking in lots of refugees from the Middle East, and was sort of kind of more right on social issues. But that alliance appears to have collapsed, because Hungary is sort of favorable to Russia, whereas Poland is super anti-Russia. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of realignment going on, but it's not all just sort of in one direction. It seems to be kind of quite complicated. I can see that, considering that the polls seem to be completely focused on the war in Ukraine now, I wouldn't be surprised if they, in the past, would have seen Le Pen being elected as an ally, and maybe looking at her now and going, "Oh no, we don't want her in."
No, I think the war has completely upended the possibilities.
No, exactly. Marius, final thoughts from you?
Yeah, just 2 things. I know Marine Le Pen has also expressed some sympathy for Putin and Russia, so that could maybe complicate things for her, because Emmanuel Macron's been quite a hard line on Russia. So it'd be interesting to see what happens. And I mean, I'm not sure how influential foreign policy will be on this election in France. But just a very interesting tidbit got from the Financial Times. In communes, I think that's basically municipalities in France, where a higher proportion of people drive to work. Marine Le Pen did well. Basically, in places where nearly everybody drives to work, she got about 30% of the votes. In places where fewer than 10% of people drive to work, she got under 10% of the vote. So, and I think that's also all to do with the rising fuel prices and so on. And she's been talking about these bread and butter issues. So it's quite interesting. So yeah, we'll have to, and I suppose it's your kind of your laptop class. People who can stay at home and work from home, who don't have to drive, are probably, higher socioeconomic levels than people who have to drive to work every day. So yeah, it's something to watch, but yeah, it's interesting.
One of the interesting things here is what seems to always happen in European countries. I can't think of a European country that violates this rule, where the capital has very different politics to like a sort of large rural rump of the country. And this is once again an example. I think, Marius, you were telling me about how badly Le Pen did inside Paris itself in terms of votes. What did she get? 6% or something?
Yeah, she Zemmour. She got about 5%, I think. Zemmour actually did better. He got about 8%. Macron got about 38%, and Melanchon, whatever, the very left-wing guy, he got about 30% of the vote. So, but I think that's a rule across the world. I mean, you'll see Joburg votes differently from, rural Limpopo. So I think bigger cities always seem I don't know what you want to describe it as.
It's like the West Coast and East Coast elites in America.
Yeah.
Right. But we also see the same thing in Britain as well, with London being, very different in its politics to a lot of the rest of the country. All right. So that's that. We will see. I think the second round of the election is on the 24th of April.
24th of April.
And
there'll be legislative elections at the beginning of June. So there'll also be something, because Macron's party did pretty well last time. They got a pretty big majority, so which made him, made it a bit easier for him to govern. But obviously, if he loses majority, I mean, I'm assuming he's going to win. But if he doesn't have a majority in the French legislature, it'll obviously make things a bit more difficult for him. That'll be something to watch.
Right. Yeah, I know. Although, as far as I understand, the French president is much more powerful than in a lot of other democratic states, and has an enormous amount of power to a degree that I certainly, as a sort of classical liberal person, would not be comfortable with. So, but anyway, French politics is a weird thing. And I saw someone on Twitter joking about this. So the French do have a habit of rioting occasionally. It's like a long political cultural tradition that goes back literally centuries. And someone made a joke that if Le Pen wins, people in Paris will probably put on their extra super special rioting boots to go riot. And it will turn out that none of the rioters voted, which seems very much like French politics. So anyway, all right, let's just move on to our next story for today very briefly, because we don't have a lot of time. And this is, we talked about it yesterday, but Sara also, I think, wanted to have a bit of input on this one. And this is the election to the regional chairpersonship of the eThekwini region for the ANC of Zandile Gumede, who is, of course, former mayor of eThekwini and is facing, I think it's 200 charges of corruption relating to a solid waste.
Over 300 million,
Yeah, something like that. Is it? Solid waste contract for the city, which is pretty bad news. But Sara, the ANC's National Working Committee, or the NWC, had something to say about Gumede's election.
Well, this is one of those things where you sort of Schadenfreude, I think, is the word I'd use, because she stepped aside rule. She stepped aside from her position on the provincial body, on the provincial legislature, but that didn't stop her from being eligible for election as the provincial national chairperson or whatever of the ANC itself.
The regional chairperson.
This is the regional chairperson, sorry, provincial, whatever, regional chairperson. So the very next day, what the NWC started talking about was creating rules about the step-aside rule for standing for positions in the ANC. And there's a lot of people were disconcerted. The Ramaphosa was disconcerted, as was his so-called faction. And what really irked them, and I think this is the funniest of the lot, is that they wanted to know how she could have been deployed that way. But she wasn't, she wasn't deployed. She was voted for. Unless voted for is deployed or deployed is voted for. And that's the problem, is the ANC can't have its deployed and eat its voted for. And the NWC and Cyril Ramaphosa have a thing on their hands.
Indeed. Marius, any thoughts on this continuing embarrassment?
Yeah, I think the ANC is really digging its own grave here. Remember, in the local election last year, they'd only got 42% of votes in eThekwini, and it seems like it only managed to hold on to mayorship by passing around brown envelopes when the voting happened. So I think this is pretty much, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the ANC is out of power in KwaZulu-Natal in 2024, which will be quite a thing, because KwaZulu-Natal was the ANC's, I think it's second best province in 2014 in terms of how many votes it got. Dropped by 10 percentage points from 2014 to 2019. And I think in 2024, I think the ANC is going to lose the majority in KwaZulu-Natal. And it's all because, I mean, there's some complicated factors. Obviously, no Zulus in the top six, getting rid of Jacob Zuma, but also I think the issue of corruption is also is also part of it. So I think KwaZulu-Natal is going to be very interesting in 2024.
And of course, I hope that all of our listeners in KZN are surviving the floods in KZN. It looks like they're pretty bad at the moment from the reporting online. So I hope you guys are all doing all right, and that it's not causing too much chaos and destruction in your lives. But anyway, that's all the time we have for today. So thank you very much for listening. We hope that you have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow on the Daily Friend Show. Cheers, everyone.